I'm Jennifer Johnson, and I raise sheep for their wool.
It is autumn here in Western New York. Preparations are underway to ensure we can provide the sheep the extra care they will need during the upcoming snowy winter months. The barns are stocked with plenty of nutritious second-cutting hay. As temperatures dip, water buckets are freezing over, so electric heated buckets have been installed in the barn and in the ram pasture to prevent their water from freezing over. Pasture grass has stopped growing as the warm months are now behind us. The ewes have been moved to the front paddock where we can easily provide them their hay rations, which will see them through the winter months until the pastures renew their spring regrowth.
It is now time to put into place our plan for spring lambs.
What is the purpose of our farm? We raise sheep for their wool for hand spinners to enjoy. Some people say,
well, of course you raise sheep for their wool. What else are you going to raise sheep for?
There are many possible purposes for sheep farms.
Some farms raise sheep to sell lambs for spring Easter meat market. Some farms raise sheep for their milk to make cheese, yogurt, and other dairy products. Many farms breed sheep with the goal of getting a diverse set of genetics, or to show in livestock exhibitions, or to sell breeding stock, or just to enjoy as pets. And of course, a farm can do a variety of these activities. But the question is,
what is it that drives the decisions that are made on the farm? On our farm, all of our decisions are based on making wool for hand spinners to enjoy.
On our farm, everything we do is about producing wool that hand spinners can enjoy. We market directly to hand spinners rather than sending our wool to a wool pool.
I don't think many people are familiar with the term wool pool. Shall I explain it for you?
Hi, Correcting Cat. Yeah, thanks. That would be great.
She's the correcting cat. She tells us this and that. Sometimes she wears a hat. She's the correcting cat.
Many sheep farms that aren't raising sheep for their wool consider wool a cost of doing business. In order for the sheep to thrive, the wool must be removed every year to prevent overheating, parasite infestation, and disease. It costs money to shear the sheep, and the only market they use to dispose of it is a local wholesale market called the wool pool. Farmers receive less than $1 per pound for their wool harvest, which usually isn't enough.
As always, you're an incredible font of knowledge. Thank you for helping me.
I'm a hand spinner, and that means I am able to understand exactly what the requirements are for farm-raised wool for hand spinning. Also, I am able to speak the language of hand spinners to learn more about what they require for specific types of hand spinning, like long draw, bulky art yarns, or very fine lace weight yarns. Producing wool for hand spinners means we do things like put coats on our ewes. So a hand spinner who secures a fleece from us doesn't have to spend time getting rid of VM or vegetative matter, which are bits of dirt and hay that get caught in the wool and make it difficult to work with. We micron test every sheep's fleece every year to better understand the quality of wool we are producing to ensure it meets our requirements, and it is what we claim it is when we market our wool. We manage nutrition in a way that optimizes our wool so it meets our requirements for fine, crimpy, dense fleeces. This means lower protein than if we were raising for meat, as a high-protein diet results in coarser wool. Here the ewes are enjoying grain, but we only give them grain for a short period of time at the end of their gestation period to ensure the pregnant moms are getting enough nutrition. But otherwise, it is a strict diet of hay, free choice loose minerals, and plenty of fresh, clean water.
So you can see, raising sheep for their wool requires a totally different set of activities and tasks that aren't required if you're raising sheep for other reasons.
Our farm's fleece standard has evolved over the years from a little of this and a little of that to very specific criteria. We used to breed for the full spectrum of Shetland fleece characteristics, knowing full well that we would get a great deal of variety. Here are some examples of sheep and fleece types we had on the farm over the past 22 years of raising Shetlands. We used the Oliver Henry scale from superfine to rough to grade our fleeces. We are now focused on the superfine end of the spectrum. Why? Not because we think it's better than the other grades, but because it's just not as common as the more coarse type of Shetland wool. This is the grading system from the Fine Fleece Shetland Sheep Association, which is the group we belong to. In the Shetland Islands, where our breed originated, approximately 3 to 4% of the annual clip is categorized as superfine. I don't know what it would be in North America because we don't have a wool broker here like Jameson and Smith to gather such statistics, but it's probably less than 3% of Shetlands today in the U.S. that would be graded as superfine. So what do we consider superfine?
So this is our Mimi, and she's a good example of what we're looking for. We need an adult micron count of 18 to 25 spinning fineness, a nice dense fleece that holds together well, 12 to 18 crimps per inch, and a staple length of 3 to 4 inches.
And the end result is wool that is next to skin soft and is a joy to work with on a wide variety of projects. Why do we breed? We breed in order to improve the overall flock fleece quality and to try to get our sheep in the flock as close to the ideal of what a Shetland sheep should look like as possible. This ideal is called a standard. The standard is a guide to help breeders produce animals that will thrive and exhibit the traits that distinguish one breed from another. What does that mean? The standard says that there should be no deformities of jaws. It is listed under the disqualifications for registering a sheep. So say you have a ewe where her bottom teeth protrude and don't settle on the gums. She may have difficulty grazing and may not thrive. This is an undesirable trait you don't want to pass on to future generations or to proliferate into the entire breed population. You want your ewes to be like this one, with a well-shaped mouth able to happily munch on pasture grass. Another example, it says in the standard that the tail needs to be fluked. It says in the standard that this is a strong character, which I take to mean can easily be identified to ensure the sheep could be a Shetland as opposed to a long-tail breed. The wool quality is called out in the standard, but it is very vague and really just requires that the fleece have some wave to it and it not be open. A fleece is open if you can easily part it and see the skin. It is really obvious on windy days when the fleece is parted just by the wind. We are really happy with our crimp and fineness, but now we're going to focus on breeding for ewe lambs that have higher yield fleeces. For reference, our Shetland fleeces average about 2 pounds unskirted. This isn't about getting bigger fleeces, though. It's about getting as much of that 2 pounds to be fiber we can offer to hand spinners as raw fleeces. High yield fleeces to me means more wool in the raw fleece that is sold to hand spinners. You can achieve high yields in 3 measurable ways. Number 1, breed for denser fleeces, the more wool per square inch. This trait is something you can feel and you can see it when you part the fleece. You could breed for a longer staple, measuring the length of the staple you take for micron testing in the spring. All samples are taken at the same time and are rude, which means we pluck the wool from the sheep rather than using clippers, so we are getting a very true representation of the staple length. You can also breed for body length, so the part of the body that's under the coat gets longer, and you can measure this just by looking at the ewe. And make a note if she's got a longer body. Usually she also requires a bigger size coat. Our makers need wool in all its forms. Therefore, selecting for these 3 traits will give us more wool that can be sold in a wide variety of preparations, including comb top, bats, and hand-spun yarn. Why do we breed in the fall? Our ewes, or female sheep, naturally go into estrus only in the fall months when the days are short. This means they can only be bred during this narrow window only in the autumn. We keep them in breeding groups for 2 cycles. Their cycle is 17 days. This chart demonstrates a little less than 2 cycles. They can cycle more often than this. The number of times they can cycle is sheep and breed dependent. They can only be bred successfully for 2 or 3 days in that cycle when their estrogen levels spike. These days are called the estrus part of her cycle. If she gets bred successfully, the cycle stops. She ovulates the last day of estrus, and this is when the egg is ready to be fertilized by the ram's sperm. We breed later in the fall than sheep farms that are raising sheep for meat because we don't need to have lambs for the early spring rush when lamb prices are high. We have our lambs in late April, early May. when the weather is warmer, so the lambs have a better chance to thrive during those critical first few days. And then they can play and have lamb races on nice sunny days. How do we decide which ewes to breed? We dedicate a considerable amount of time to the selection of breeding ewes each year. The first thing we do is put into words what our goals are for that year's lamb crop, as well as our flock goals longer term. Long term, we always are breeding for fine crimpy fleeces, parasite resistance, and conformation to the breed standard. Our short-term goal for 2024 is to breed for sheep that produce 50% or more of their wool under the coat. For our short-term goal of high-yield fleeces where 50% or more of the wool is under the coat, I've been analyzing our fleeces and collecting data. Weights on the fleeces under the coat compared with the weight of the fiber from the skirtings. Ewes that have higher yields based on these calculations were candidates for breeding groups. These are a few of the ewes that made the cut. This is Brunhild. She has a spinning fineness of 18.8 and has excellent conformation. I didn't get her yield because I didn't skirt her fleece, I just processed it myself. Mabel is a 4-year-old with spinning fineness of 21.6, so that's an example of a ewe that holds on to her fineness even as an adult. Rosalind's spinning fineness is 20.2 and her yield was 58%. Lucretia has that nice long body we like and has all the other numbers to qualify her for breeding. I'll be doing a deep dive video on all the ewes and rams we bred with this year in a future video.
In order to achieve our long-term goals, we avoid breeding ewes that need to be dewormed frequently because they don't have parasite resistance. Also, ewes whose fleeces tend to get coarser as they age. And then just ewes that don't conform to the standard, as well as some of those standout ewes in our flock that are built really strong and straight.
There are additional criteria that are immediate disqualifiers for being selected as a breeding ewe. Age is the first. We never breed lambs, which are sheep under 12 months of age. This was Alice Paul as a lamb just before breeding season, a lot smaller than she is now as a full-grown ewe. Shetlands are a slow-growing breed and take 3 years to reach full maturity. We like to give them at least 2 full years to develop before being submitted to the stress of carrying a lamb. And we retire our ewes from breeding when they hit 10 years of age. They're still fertile and could still breed, but we don't like to breed them after 10 years of age. Any ewes we are considering for breeding that look on the small side get weighed to ensure they make our weight requirement of 60 pounds. Here you can see me standing on the scale with this lamb to keep her still so we can get an accurate weight. The digital meter on the right gives the weight of the lamb as my weight has been subtracted out in the software. This was actually during the summer we were trying to measure out dosage for medication, so we're not breeding with that little girl. And we consider their lambing history. Locala, for example, she had these dear sweet twin ewes 9 months ago, and we don't forcibly wean our ewe lambs, so she's probably still producing a very small amount of milk, which will impact her condition and readiness to carry another lamb so soon after being in milk production. How do we decide which rams we use? Deciding on the ram for breeding is critical because we're spreading his traits over so many ewes. We really need to make sure he ticks all the boxes for a solid breeding ram. This is Sebastian's breeding group from this year. On our farm, you can distinguish the rams because they aren't wearing coats. Fleece type, conformation, health, and yield are the traits we consider when selecting our breeding rams. This year, we're going to be breeding with 3 adult rams, Duncan, Sebastian, and Harry. Duncan is the dominant ram in the group of 3 rams, and Harry, the white ram, is the lowest on the totem pole, even though he has a year advantage over Sebastian and Duncan. This is the first year we are using rams that are the same size. We are not using smaller ram lambs this year for breeding. Having rams the same size over the winter means I will only need to tend 1 ram pen. We separate rams based on size in order to keep the smaller rams safe.
So on our farm, we've chosen to just breed for 2 cycles, and a cycle is 17 days, so that means that the breeding groups are going to be set up for about a month and a half. Once the breeding cycles are complete, we split up the groups, we put all the ewes back in the barn, and then we have to reintroduce the rams. So this ram reintroduction phase is very violent. The rams are aggressively trying to reestablish the hierarchy, who's the top ram, and it involves a lot of fighting and tussling and shoving. It's good this year that I've got rams all the same size. If I have smaller rams, I'd have to set up separate pens for them to overwinter them, because if I put a small ram in with those adults, that small ram runs the risk of serious injury or even death, because he's going to get in the fray. He's going to attempt to be a top ram even though he's smaller than the rest. It's just their instinct. That's just the way they behave. So one pen all winter is really great for me. There was a year I had 3 ram pens because there was 3 different sizes. There was ones that were 1-year-old, 2-year-olds, and 3-year-olds, and they take that long to mature to full size. So I'm pretty happy this year about overwintering just 3 adult rams.
The 3 rams we selected this year all have great fiber, conformation, and high yields, and a side benefit is they all rue, which is a trait that I really like. What is a breeding group? On our farm, a breeding group is made up of 1 male or ram and the ewes that we decide to breed with the ram. Technically, rams can breed 20 to 30 ewes, no problem, but that is really stressful for the ram and usually causes him to lose weight or condition. This is not good because he needs that weight to keep him warm over the cold, harsh winter months. We will at most give a ram 8 to 10 ewes. This year we're only breeding 15 ewes, so the groups are a lot smaller than that.
You set up breeding groups because you have to identify who the sire is when you register the lambs. So in order to register a sheep, you have to know the sire and the dam. They both have to be registered if you want to have a registered lamb. Registering is important because you want to know that the sheep is the breed you say it is and the products from that sheep are from that breed. So the rams and the ewes that we are breeding are going to be separated from the flock and isolated in their own pens so that when the lamb arrives, we will be able to tell exactly who the sire is or their father.
We register our sheep with the North American Shetland Sheep Association. They maintain a database of all the registered Shetland sheep in the U.S. and Canada and provide a 5-generation pedigree. We use these 5-generation pedigrees when we are considering bringing new sheep onto the farm. We can research specific sheep that we like to understand if they're related to our flock, and if they're related to sheep we know have traits that we like. It is also helpful when others are interested in securing breeding stock from us. We can just share the pedigree, and they can use the data to their benefit to add more diversity or to identify particular lines they want in their flock. How do you set up breeding groups? I have an index card made up for every sheep in our flock. When it is time to decide on breeding groups, I can easily make up the groups using the cards. On each card is the name, ear tag, a color code, F for fawn, year of birth, sire and dam, and grandsire and dams, and pattern. Also a running tally of their spinning fineness from each year's collection. As the ewe ages, we watch for those who retain low spinning fineness, and we select for those ewes, as this is a desirable trait we want to replicate in future generations. Spinning fineness, designated as SF on the report, is the one number we use from our micron report when we just want one number to compare sheep to sheep. Using the information on the cards helps guide the decision of which ewe to put with which ram based on our criteria and goals for that year. One criteria that overrides everything is, are they related? We don't breed sheep that are related.
So here I've got Sebastian, who's out of Audi and Knightley. So if I put Bianca's card next to his as a possible breeding pair, I can see right away it's not going to work because they're both out of Knightley. So that's not a good one. Not a good pair. So let's take a look at this example. So we have Sebastian and Mira Reed. So they don't share any parents. However, they have a common grandfather. And so these cannot be bred together in our program because we don't like to do line breeding or breed relatives.
Another criteria I use to figure out breeding pairs is, does the combination help me achieve my goal for that year's lamb crop? These lambs from 2023 gave us genetic diversity using imported semen from UK-based Shetland rams and artificial insemination to further our goals. For our 2024 lambs, we will ask, does this combination increase fleece yields, help improve conformation, and strengthen parasite resistance? Are there any traits I want to correct in a ewe that has other traits I really like? Sebastian is a great ram for fixing conformation issues. Then I map out the farm and create a step-by-step plan for physically setting up the groups. It seems kind of excessive, but when you are physically setting up the groups in the moment with sheep running around and you're moving gates and restraining very excited rams, having a very detailed step-by-step plan is good, especially when you have people helping you so they know exactly what to expect. The physical part of setting up the breeding groups relies on a good plan, reliable enclosures, and a method of moving the sheep from one space to another. This year we're going to be using the 3 pens to the west of the barn. Sebastian got the largest pen because we gave him the most ewes. You can't have any of the pens sharing a wall, as the rams can breed ewes through fence openings. I have no idea how this happens, but it does happen. And here you can see we have a 4-foot space in between the 2 pens. You have to be sure the pens are impenetrable, not escapable, and that the gates are very secure. The pens have to provide adequate shelter for the number of sheep that will be living in the pen for the duration of the breeding season. They need a heated water bucket that works and is plugged in.
That's not supposed to happen.
This one's good.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not plugged in.
Ah, it's not plugged in. Great.
Rams are very motivated during breeding season and will put a lot of effort into getting at any ewes that are in any proximity to their pen. They're never satisfied with just the ewes in their pen, and if there is a ewe in heat in one of their neighboring pens, expect him to try to get to her. Tightly secured gates and very strong fencing is critical to prevent a ram breeding an unplanned ewe. You can't run a ram through a pen of ewes he won't be breeding, so you have to make sure the ewes are always placed in the sequence that will prevent this from happening. I've seen a ram breed a ewe within seconds of being introduced to a group of ewes. They move pretty fast. Finally, after all the planning and decision-making and physical work, we are ready to introduce the ewes and the rams to each other and to their new homes for the next month and a half. Duncan's group was the first one to go. We prepared the lane for the ewes to get them to their pen. Next step was to separate out Duncan's ewes from the rest of the flock.
Break out now for Duncan's group. It's the first group we're going to create. So I got to pull 4 ewes out of here and put them in the center section.
I separated out his 4 ewes. The first ewe was not very excited about being singled out. Then we ran Duncan's ewes to their breeding pens. A lot of things went wrong the first run out, but we did manage to get them into the correct pen. Next up was Harry's group, next door neighbors to Duncan's, but far enough away for any risks associated with sharing fence lines. Learning from past mistakes, we closed off the gate that allowed them to retreat back into the barn, saving us a little time, as they really weren't in sync with the program. Looking back, I also should have realized that 3 of the ewes in the group are, let's say, a little more high-strung, and so we should have given them a much smaller lane to travel to get to their pen and that nice block of hay. As I rewatch this with a critical eye, I see that we should have narrowed that lane a lot more and closed off access to the tall grass area. This would have required setting up a few more panels, but for some reason, even with all our experience, we just thought the ewes would quickly figure out that they should go through that narrow opening in that pen to their final destination. Even with the lure of that nice pile of hay, it really took some convincing to move these girls into their pen. Fortunately, I was able to force one of them into the pen, and then the other 3 followed her in very nicely. Then we set to getting the lane to the ram pasture built using my sidel panels I bought at an estate sale. Well, at least I was building the lane. Rich was busy pretending to be a Bigfoot sighting for my video. We decided to run both rams together, thinking they'd team up and be easier to manage. We locked up Sebastian and let Harry and Duncan find their way to their ewes. We don't have a herding dog, but it turns out our new drone does an excellent job herding the sheep when we need to move them from one place to another. It looks like they think Adelina there is their target. I suppose that's a fair assumption, but it's not the case. After we locked them into the section between the 2 pens, we quickly put them in with their ewes, as we didn't want any commotion with a ram trying to get at ewes that weren't allocated to him. I panicked after we put in Duncan, afraid I put him in the wrong group, so I quickly checked the plan. And we had done it correctly, thank goodness. The rams get busy very quickly, and for the first few hours, they're playing catch-up and get very tired. This effort causes the ram to burn a lot of calories, and it's why we like to keep our groups on the small side. Next up was Sebastian's group. Sebastian's ewes had a different, longer path than Harry and Duncan's ewes. Sebastian's group will be residing in the ram paddock, so he stayed put in the brown ram hut, and we ran the girls to him. He was literally climbing the walls waiting for his ewes to arrive. We had to move a gate or two to adjust for the different paths, but very soon we were ready to move Sebastian's ewes. Everything's open, right?
Yeah.
Because you want to just double check? Let's just do a quick double check. Just make sure. Ready? Okay. Anytime there's an opening, they freak out. That's where we want them. Then we released Sebastian so he could service his ewes. This is an incredibly stressful and confusing time for the sheep, so we really can't reinforce enough the importance of a well thought through step-by-step plan. Even with all our experience and careful planning, you can see we made an error in our plan. These ewes thought they were going down their familiar lane on their way to their nice pasture, but then we threw them a curveball by diverting them into a space that they never occupied before, and that kicked in their instincts to run away as fast as possible. Probably should have pulled all those tall dead weeds before moving them through here. That would have reduced their anxiety levels. What outcomes are you hoping for? It takes 147 days for lambs to gestate and be born, so we set up groups over Thanksgiving weekend and expect lambs mid-April through early May. I'm hoping for a 50-50 mix of ewes and rams. I have a hard time selling ewes, which I have to do if I'm going to continue breeding for spring lambs every year. So I don't mind getting a lot of rams, as I usually sell most of the ram lambs at market. I'm breeding 14 ewes this year, so if I get 9 ewe lambs, that would be a good outcome. I would love a nice, well-built white ram that I can use for future breeding, preferably out of one of the purchased ewes, to add more diversity and minimize related sheep in the flock. Long bodies, dense long fleeces that still have low micron and the type of crimp I like would be great, but we won't be able to tell about the lamb's fleece qualities for at least a year. Which is why I don't sell ewe lambs. Rather, we keep them for a year to evaluate their full fleece to determine if they fit within our standard. Our farm is a small operation, and though it generates a modest income, we aren't in a position where we rely on the proceeds of the farm to sustain our homestead. We are driven to tend to a successful farm because we love to care for the sheep. We enjoy the challenges involved with keeping a healthy, well-built flock of sheep that produce wool that is enjoyed by hand spinners. Our product is wool, not lambs, but producing lambs each spring is an important contributor to the success of our farm. Each year, the new crop of lambs gets us closer to our goals that we set for the flock. Every lamb that's born gets us one step closer to our dream of the perfect flock of sheep, healthy, strong, and producing the type of wool we want to offer ham spinners.
We're so grateful for these animals and for the joy that they've brought into our life. And we're grateful to you for your continued support of our channel and our farm. For more information on the topics that I've covered in this video, go to the description and I'll put some links there of related content that I've created. Thank you for watching. I hope you can come back soon.